Glad you're back. Good to see you again. I've had a good time so far. Boundaries is always one of those studies where people come up and tell these stories and they'll say, man, this week's been great. I've been going, that's bad boundaries, or no. And I said, no. And I said, it was good. And I said, amen, brother, sister. Keep saying no. Just a quick reminder before we get started. Remember, a common question I get is, if I establish boundaries in my life, does that mean I'm a mean punk? Something like that. The answer is no. No. Having boundaries doesn't mean you're rude. It doesn't mean you're not compassionate. In fact, the opposite. You have genuine empathy and genuine compassion when you have good boundaries because you love people freely. You're not driven by guilt. You're not driven by manipulation. You do it because you want to do it. That's genuine compassion. That's genuine love. So it doesn't mean you get mean. In fact, you're free to love now. You're free to give sacrificially. And you do it, every ounce that you give to the other person is because you freely gave that ounce. You don't feel resentful. People with good boundaries don't ever resent anybody else. Ever. Ever. They don't feel used because they're not. Because they've said no when appropriate. Think about the people in your life you resent. I can't believe she made me do this or he made me do this. Again, the problem is yours, not theirs, for allowing it. The first time we can be victims. We can be genuine victims. But any exposure past that is our doing in general, not when you're a child and so forth. But as adults, as grown-ups, that's the difference. Children is a different story. We'll talk about that next week. But in general, adults, we don't do that. So if you find yourself feeling guilty or manipulated, that's a boundary problem. If you find that you, like we talked about last week, you have a problem saying no to yourself, no to spending, no to eating, no to drinking, no to certain things, addictive substances, you have internal boundary problems. And those are the things not to run away from or deny or be terribly scared of. We just first accept it as it is. Reality is, I've got a problem here. I need to work on my boundary in this area. Let's get to work. Let's get to work. Now, a little bit along the way, I've been giving you little tips of how do I get to work each night. And I'm going to do a lot more of that 2 weeks on the last night after we talk about boundaries in God. Then we'll spend about the last 30 minutes or so talking about big steps. How do you know you're healing from boundaries? And we'll do more Q&A time then. So boundaries, again, is all about knowing what is your responsibility and what is not your responsibility. What is your responsibility, what is not your responsibility. For example, responsibility with others in general, with the self was last week. Tonight's with the spouse. Next week with our blessed children. And the last week with God Almighty Himself, Father, Son, Spirit. And then, of course, we'll do a wrap-up of how do we know we're doing well with our boundaries. Boundaries in the spouse. I hope you have a handout. All right? And we'll hit the ground running. Boundaries with my spouse. Now, let's talk about this notion of becoming one flesh. This is a very common expression about becoming one flesh. Now, we see it all through Mark and 1 Corinthians and Ephesians. They all quote from Genesis 2:24. Biblically speaking, to become one flesh is referencing two kinds of things. One literal physical representation, of course, for the intercourse, to become one flesh in that way. But secondly, of course, there's the metaphorical reference to the intense degree to which they bond. Now, because so many people have a misunderstanding of what it means to be one flesh, and because of the nature of the bonding is so extreme, there's a lot of boundary problems when it comes to a marriage relationship. There's a lot of them. Again, to say it one more time, because there's usually confusion about what it means to be one flesh, and we'll talk about a lot more of that in just a second, and also because it is the bonding experience is so powerful, it's easy to be enmeshed. Enmeshed is where you don't have boundaries, and you don't know where the other person ends and you begin. They're happy, you're sad, they're sad, and so forth, because the bonding can be so strong. So let's talk about that. The physical reference, of course, we have a metaphorical reference. These two things go together. But when we understand those two things, it's very important to remember that Jesus and the early church never ever suggested that we need to be married, please listen, in order to be whole persons or His disciples. Jesus nor the early church ever once suggested we have to be married in order to be complete whole individuals or be His disciples. Matthew 19, Jesus says explicitly that there's marriage between man and woman and those who are eunuchs. Of course, that means the one who's castrated. He says those who were born that way, those to whom that was done to them. That means they were bought and lost in war and it became slaves. Or third, they did it for the kingdom's sake. That is for religious reasons. They're celibate. And the disciples go, oh my goodness, this is tough. And Jesus says, that's not for everybody. So Jesus, our Lord and King, says, you can get married, you can stay single. Paul in the early church, same thing. Same thing. Look, if you can't control yourself, get married. Paul says, now I'm not speaking for the Lord, but for myself. If you can handle it, stay single. So you can be fully devoted to Jesus and the kingdom. But if you want to get married, get married. He never says you're not complete. Come on now, don't forget. God made Adam and Eve. You got to get married or you're not really a somebody. And unfortunately in church for a long time, and there's still many, many churches still preaching this message, you're not really somebody until you're married. Really is against what Jesus and the early church believed. That's really important before I move on the whole rest of the night, that we really understand that. Because that leads into the next point. Healthy marriages, therefore, based on the teaching of Jesus and the early church, healthy marriages are when you join one whole person with one whole person. And I say here in the notes, mature, independent, healthy persons who join their lives together. Mature, independent, healthy persons who join their lives together. It is not half a person plus half a person. And this is where I find in my experience in counseling, especially premarital, it seems to be so difficult for younger couples to get the fact that puppy romantic Hollywood love is not at all what God intends, nor is that reality, nor should that be our goal. And for so many couples I've counseled after marriage who are on the brink of divorce, many times they will talk as if they did believe and do still believe that what they should have been experiencing all along was that puppy dog infatuation phase, and that's what real love was. I couldn't wait to be around him or her, and for some reason we just drifted apart. What they mean is my infatuation phase got over. I don't like that anymore. I like thrills. He doesn't thrill me anymore. Now what? Well, I got to find the next Jimmy or Bob at work or someone else who gives me thrills. And so they don't realize at all that it's not at all what, as a Christian, and of course, therefore means what God wants, that's not what God wants us to do. He doesn't want 50-50. And so when you think back to Tobey Maguire, I can't even say Toby because the actor. Jerry Maguire, because Tobey Maguire is the actor. Jerry Maguire, right, and Tom Cruise, the big climactic sentence, right? What is it? You complete me. Right, he's the sign language he says in ASL to the woman in the elevator. You can, in the big ending of the show, in the movie, that's the big, you complete me. And that is quintessential Hollywood. And it's quintessentially false. It's bad marriage philosophy. And it sells, and we cry and we weep, and I want a relationship just like that. And you do at first. You do it first. And I've seen it so many times, and any counselor will tell you they've seen it too. The things at first you just love because they completed in you are annoying after year one, after month one sometimes. The very thing, they just get me, they just calm me down. I'm so worked up. And then now later on, you just meet the same couple later. He's a lazy son of a gun, and she's a control freak. And those exact same features attracted you when you married. The exact same features. And we spend all of our marriage trying to change our spouse and then get ticked off they're not the same person we married. There are profound boundary problems in marriage over and over. And it starts with this fundamental misunderstanding that marriage is about two whole people getting together. Two whole people. And I have a video, I can get the audio to work, and there's a great scene in a movie I don't suggest you go watch. It's funny, but it's got inappropriate parts, called Coming to America with Eddie Murphy. And in that scene, in Coming to America, at the very beginning of the movie, he has arranged marriage, and he doesn't want to do that. And you can't hear it. I know. I'm just going to show a little clip of it. This Eddie Murphy comes up and says, "Hello, how's it going?" He takes her aside privately, and he goes, "Hello," and he goes, "Great, nice to meet you." "Oh, well, great, wonderful. What are your desires?" She goes, "Whatever you like." And he goes, "Well, good. What's your favorite food?" "Whatever you like." No. Well, for example, do you have favorite music? And she goes, "Absolutely." He goes, "Great. What is it?" "Whatever you like." And she said, "I've been trained," she's bowing. "I've been trained all my life to say whatever you like." "Whatever you like." "Yeah, whatever you like." And he's getting frustrated. And at the very end he says, "Are you telling me anything I tell you to do, you're supposed to do it. Train. She goes, uh-huh. He goes, bark like a dog. She goes, whoa, whoa, whoa. And he goes, hop on one leg. And she goes, whoa, whoa. And I mean, it's just silly. And I thought, and of course we laugh at silly, but I know many marriages not far from this. Genuinely not far from this. Whatever she wants, he does. Whatever he wants, she does. There's some dominant person who dominates, and there's always a dominant person in every relationship to some degree. And then what happens is it's called enmeshment, that some person eventually bows in. I'll talk about this more later. That's why arguing is so healthy. Arguing demonstrates independence, and that's good. That's good. So what do we talk about when we talk about one whole person, one whole person? There's a difference between, I love how Clown Townsend talk about this, and boundaries in marriage. And that's where most of this material, about 80-90%, comes from. Boundaries in marriage. I love how they make this distinction because it's perfect. There's a difference between completing and complementing. Now, I hope you'll read along with me, just right in the middle there, page 9, because this is so important. I hear this, unfortunately, I don't hear this enough, so let's make sure we hear it real clearly. Completing means that one spouse is attempting to make up for another's immaturity. Now, immature just means, let's say it this way, ungrown, right? It's just, we've said an immature, whatever, tomato or apple, or banana, it's not ready yet. It's not mature yet. It's not fully grown yet. So completing is when I'm making up, say me and Elaine, let's say if I'm completing Elaine, it means I am fulfilling, I'm making up for her immaturity in some area. So she's a little baby, emotionally, psychologically, physically, something, in some area, and I'm putting myself to fill in her gaps. That's completing. That's the you complete me stuff. He's always on time and I'm always so late. She's the life of the party and I'm so shy. And then it's just perfect. Just opposites attract and opposites divorce every day. Every day. Every day. Because those things at first, Google eyes, to get past that, all of a sudden, that annoys the snot out of me. You're controlling. You're laid back. Get over. And no. We'll talk about that. Completing is that set. Complimenting is different. Complimenting is when a particular spouse's talents and preferences are used alongside another person. When they're used alongside the other person. There's another movie, I'm not telling you to go watch it, but it's got inappropriate parts. That's the way the world works. I don't watch just G movies, but anyway, that's between a different story. Bob and Walt Tenner on Stuck on You. And the message of the movie, of course, is Bob and Walt Tenner are conjoined twins. And the whole message of the movie is that, of course, people who make fun of people like that, they're the jerks, closed-minded, narrow-minded bigots. So these guys are just living life, trying to live it to the full, and it's a comedy. But through the movie, you see the world through their lens, and that is people are always laughing at them, making fun of them. So the movie's not about making fun of conjoined twins. It's actually making fun of those people who look down upon them or call them freaks or whatever. And so the movie is they have to deal with how to have relationships, even though they're conjoined. How to deal with life, going to the restroom, whatever it is. And some silly, they have this part where they're playing sports together. And so one's up there, of course, where the one is there, the other one, they're attached right here on the side. And one's just about to pitch, and the one behind them throws out the first baseman. Or they're boxing, and they go and they both got, all their clothes are always stitched together. And the boxing ring, they got 4 gloves, and beating this little kid up, and he's going crazy. And for Halloween, there are 4, whatever, and it shows all this, but they're having a fun time. They're jumping on the beds together, and they just love each other, and they love life. Then there comes a point where one of the brothers really wants an acting career. He really wants to go to Hollywood. And so Matt Damon, the other brother, says, I'll go with you, of course. I support it. So let's go do it. And he goes, moves to Hollywood. He grows up, and in his own maturity and so forth, he gets really, really famous. And they start saying, the word gets out that they're conjoined twins, because in Hollywood they can hide that or whatever. And then there's a big issue. The one brother says, I want to get separate. I want to be separate. And they go back and forth, and and finally they decide to do it. And they get separate. And so, and there's a big scene in the movie where all of a sudden they're in 2 different beds. And then afterwards, they do exactly what you would expect is they both do different forms of depression. Because they spend every day together, all the time, doing things, completing each other's sentences, doing the same things together every second, whatever you like. I mean, back and forth and back and forth. And so the movie goes a little darker tone because they do their lives independently, but they don't know how to navigate it just right. But over time, through a series of years or two, whatever, they go through a lot of heartaches and broken relationships or whatever, and eventually they come to a place they get more healed and restored, and then they meet each other again. Of course, now they're two independent people, and they have a great relationship. And the very last scene of the movie, they're walking together toward this play where they're going to be in a drama, a play, and they're walking up, and they're stuck together again. And you're like, how'd that happen? Because they've been independent people. They're walking again right beside each other. And they get up right to the door, and as soon as they get close, they separate, and they realize right here was Velcro, and it goes, it just pops right off. And I remember when I saw that, I thought, that's it. That's marriage. They are two independent, healthy human souls who decided to get attached for a time being and can always separate whenever they want. I don't mean divorce. I mean they can do independent things and come back together. But it took that time to be whole and healed and whatever to be able to say now they're at each other not as some codependent kind of siblings, but they want to be in a relationship. In a similar way, when we compliment our spouse, it's not because I need my spouse to be happy. It's not because I need my spouse to make it. It's not because I need my spouse or my life is miserable or the whole, I couldn't live without you, I just die. That is complete, not compliment. Complimented couples say, of course I could make it without you. I was born without you and I can live without you. I'm choosing to join my life with your life. And I'm asking you to choose to join your life with my life. And together, we're a powerhouse. Together, we join our dreams together, our vision together. Together, we might have children together. Together, we will have some similar interest and be a support for each other and help each other grow and push each other when we're weak. And we'll point out weaknesses in each other and increase our strengths in each other. But not because I need you, because I want you. I don't want you to need me. I want you to want me. And do it freely. And you have time to go with your friends. I have time with my friends. Now, here's some things that a spouse should not complete. For example, I've got a longer list on the handout. For example, Elaine is not responsible for my spiritual or emotional growth. She's not responsible for that. She might want it, but she's not responsible for it. I'm responsible for my growth. I'm responsible for whether or not I read the Bible, whether I do my prayer life, whether I'm going on mission, whether or not I'm loving God with my heart, soul, strength, and mind. I'm responsible. She's not responsible, but she completes me because she's the real Christian in our couple. She reads the Bible for me and just kind of gives me a Cliff's Notes. She prays for our family. I know I should. See, that's completing. No. I'm responsible for that. She's responsible for her own. Ability to connect emotionally. She doesn't complete that. I need to work on being able to bond with her and her bond with me and be bond with other people in appropriate levels. Things like that. Ability to say no to things. I give in so easy, but boy, I tell you what, he just helps me say no all the time. Well, when you're growing initially, that's good. When you're doing baby boundaries, that's good. But as we mature and we grow up, we can get to a place where our spouse is not making those decisions for us. So when we're really unhealthy, it's good. For example, we have addictions or really, really bad on boundary problems in a certain area. Let's say, for example, you have a person in your family. It usually works this way. There's usually a mom or dad who's very bad for your family. They're boundary busters, they're violators, and maybe they were addicts or so forth. And you have a spouse who's working with the child of that addict parent, and they're starting to heal, and they're going through an enormous amount of grief and abandonment issues and rage issues and anger issues and whatever, and the spouse is supporting them. And the one spouse feels a real bad compulsion to go back and make mom or daddy happy. In those moments, it's very appropriate for the other healthier spouse to say, no. And if you can't say no, I will take the phone from you. When you feel real tempted, give me your cell phone. When you feel real tempted to go spend, give me the checkbook or the Visa card. For the time being, because you're developing baby boundaries. And I want to help you, because I want you to grow up. I'm not spending the rest of my marriage taking the phone from you. But in the healing process time, yes. Yeah, I'm here for you. I married you. Velcro, I'm here for you. I'm your cheerleader. I'm not the codependent enabler who will do this the rest of your life. There has to be a time, again, that's back to spiritual and emotional growth. You're responsible for it. I can't go to counseling for you. I can ask you to, but you have to do it yourself. So sometimes saying no to things, they need help. But in general, it's the spouse's job to do that. Ability to grieve from wounds and trauma. Our spouse is not responsible for whether or not we grieve. It is not. I know people who read a lot of, this is just a common thing. So many people get a real big payoff of playing the victim. And so something legitimate happened to them when they were a child or university days or 20s, 30s. Something really happened. And they'll spend the rest of their life talking about that event as if it's a present reality. And hear me very clearly, and I've said this many times as clearly as I know how to say it. There's a big difference between being a genuine victim in the moment, and that happens. People, and I talked about that last week. When you're a genuine victim, is when you're in a powerless state and you're injured. That's serious, and it should be taken seriously. However, the recovery from that victimhood state, this stage is up to you. You can't change what was done to you. I can't change what was done to me. That was beyond my control. What I am in control of is my woundedness and my grieving process and my healing process. And this is, in my opinion, just phenomenal. God designed us, by the way, while we're at it, God designed us such that it doesn't matter how many years have gone by, you can always change your response to a past event. The answer is amen. That's incredible. You can be 60 years old and have something happen when you're a baby and go to counseling for the first time in your life and heal from it. You can't change the event, but you can heal from a past event. You can control your healing. It doesn't matter. Time won't heal it, by the way. That's ridiculous. It might take away some of the sting. I went to the doctor and said, I got this gush of blood. And the doctor goes, you need to get some Psst, give it time. Give it time. And I black out. I fall on the ground, blacked out, and I wake back up. What happened? Just give it time, right? How's that working out, David? And you're bleeding to death. Well, you're not bleeding as much because your blood kind of coagulated. Good for you. And you walk out. Just give it time, doc. Just give it time. And he sees me in a few years, and I'm limping. Oh, no. You understand, at the time, it wasn't my fault. And the doctor says, I prescribed physical therapy 48 years ago. Why are you still limping? You don't understand what happened to me. I know exactly what happened to you. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't your fault. Why have you chosen not to get therapy? There's no different with emotional wounds. And it's not our spouse's job to make sure we grieve, to make sure we heal from that. On and on it goes. Our spouse is not setting our goals for us. The spouse is not a parent. It's not our spouse's job to make sure we feel loved, secure, valuable. On and on it goes. So these are all kinds of things. Now let me just read this with me. Your spouse is a human person, not a means to an end existing to meet your needs. That's the distinction between completing and complementing. A person who wants someone to complete me, you complete me. You're using your spouse as a means to an end, which means you're using your spouse. Your spouse isn't an object. It's not a child of God. He or she is no longer a human person. He or she is a tool because you're too immature to deal with your own problems. And that's not what spouses are. They're individual, independent, loved by God, human persons who are an end of themselves. And the same goes for you, for your spouse. You're not a means to an end. And again, please hear me well, because it's different when I don't have if it's a smaller setting, people ask these questions, I'm trying to assume things you might be asking in your head. I'm not, and I've already said a little bit of this before, I'm not assuming there are seasons in life when you fill in the gaps a little bit in the meantime. Of course you do. Of course you do. If Elaine broke her ankle and she's got crutches, I'm going to help open the doors a little extra than I usually do. I always try to do that, but of course. But it doesn't mean the rest of their life I'm feeding her with a spoon or she broke her arm. That would be, of course there's seasons for things. But the season has direction and has a time limit. Otherwise, she's just using me as a means to an end. David feeds me all the time. That kind of stuff. And she does, by the way, every day. We're working on that. No, she doesn't. What about my feelings? What about my feelings? Back to week 1. As adults, it is our duty to take responsibility for how we feel. To communicate, feel, and integrate our own feelings. It's our responsibility. Now think about that. I'm telling you, sisters and brothers, this 1 week, well, I guess I'm pretty passionate about all of the weeks, but when it comes to spousal relationships, I have a special interest in couples for some reason, and I just see it so much where there is a person in the relationship who claims way too much responsibility. And what happens is the person who claims too much responsibility, that person's called a rescuer. And they don't like the way let me just be real specific. This doesn't happen in our marriage, but if it did, we'd work on it. But let's say, for example, every single time Elaine started to feel sad, let's say she made dinner and she was trying something new and it didn't work out well. Which I don't care. She tried, and praise God, she's a lot better cook than I am. I'd go, well, you tried, it didn't work out. Let's say for a second, but because I've had bad boundaries on this area, and I don't like that she feels sad. Now, be real clear, listen very carefully. It's that I don't like how I feel that she's sad. And because I don't like how I feel that she's sad, I try to rescue her. Don't you worry about that, honey. That's a hard recipe, and it was stupid anyway. That oven's broken, and don't you worry about that. And it was taste buds, and you're wonderful, you're beautiful, and don't you be very clear about this. I'm not doing that because I care about her pain. Whose pain do I care about? Mine. Rescuers are narcissists. Rescuers don't like the way they feel when other people are hurt. And the reason why is because they haven't learned to integrate those feelings of pain. So when I empathize with people, and I do all the time, I'm very empathetic. I was counseling a woman today who just cried and cried about all these issues going on, and I'm very sad for her. I'm very sad for her. But I know very well that if I just broke down and wept and wept and wept for 3 days, it doesn't help her at all. It doesn't help her. She doesn't go, I feel better because now it's 2 and 1 crying. We just knocked this out. I just halved my grieving time. But I feel sad for her. I do feel sad for her. But it's her job to work on her feelings. So I give her homework and here's some tips. I pray for you in your journey, and I'm so sorry you're sad, and da-da-da-da. That's how in spousal relationships. That is to say, I can process those painful feelings inside me, work through them, and get them out of my system. But rescuers don't. Rescuers take other people's sadness and pain in themselves, and it feels so chaotic and so anxious building and whatever. They don't like it, so they rescue. That's your boundary problem, or it's your spouse's boundary problem. So when your spouse is sad, you let them be sad. You get sad with them. I'm so sorry you're sad, honey. You can cry if you want. That's great. And I hope that, what can I do to help you grieve? What can I help you do? I don't want to stop you from being sad. I don't want you to stop you from being happy. What can I do to help you work through these motions? I'm here with you. I'm here. I'm your number one fan. We're in this together, the long haul. We got married. What can I do to help you grieve and move on, move through this? What can I do? Pray for you, journal with you, buy you 14 journals. What would it take? I'll do whatever it takes. But I can't take that pain upon myself fully because it's not my responsibility. My own pain is my responsibility. So this is a biggie. Now, we're not taking responsibility for our feelings when we expect our spouse to read our minds, read our body language, expect our spouse to meet our emotional needs. Right? So every time why didn't he read my mind? Couldn't you tell I was mad? When that stuff happens, it demonstrates you have bad boundaries, that you're expecting your spouse to pick up and make you feel better. That's why this last bullet point, it's crucial for us not to feel or take responsibility for or seek to control our spouse's feelings. And I use the word crucial on purpose. It's crucial in a healthy marriage not to feel, that is, not to feel like we need to, or take on responsibility or seek to control our spouse's feelings. Well, in what ways are we trying to, here's some common ways we try to control feelings. We rescue. It's okay. And people who rescue don't like how they feel on the inside, so to get over their own anxiety, they got to hurry and have you to stop crying. So that's one way we try to control their feelings. We suppress it. Shut up. Be quiet. I don't want to hear it. You think your day was bad. I'll give you something to cry about. That's what happens to our children. That's next week. That's suppressing. That's called suppressing it. In other words, you keep those inside of you. See, that's not good. That's not healthy either. It's not that just because I'm not taking the responsibility for your healing on, it doesn't mean I don't empathize and don't want to hear it. I want to hear every bit of it. I want to hear it. Bring it on. I'm here to listen and be a support. It just means that your ability to process those emotions and move on is your responsibility. All right? We discount it. Oh, get over it. You always say that. It's no big deal. What about the way I feel? See, that's to vitiate the way they feel. That's discounting. We're trying to control their feelings by discounting it. It's no big deal. So what? It was just promotion. It wasn't a big deal anyway. Right? Whatever, we discount it. We discount it. We do that with all the time with kids. All the time. It was just a flower. Not to them it wasn't. And not to our spouses sometimes. We punish them. We can. We can punish them because they have feelings. For example, if he gets mad at me, fine. We won't have sex for a year. Fine. I know many. I've had many counseling couples where she just cuts them off, make fun of them, call them names. These are ways to punish your spouse because they have a feeling you don't like. That's ways we seek to control someone else's feelings. We punish them by saying mean things about them, belittling them. You're just like your mom. You're such a loser. You whatever it is, these hateful, hateful, hateful things that destroy marriages. Instead, we need to have responsibility for how we feel. We might say something like, honey, the food wasn't very good. It wasn't. But I don't really care. I appreciate you trying. I wasn't up there cooking. I was doing some other work or whatever, and I appreciate the fact that you tried to take care of our family. And she's weeping and crying and all upset. Well, honey, I'm sorry you're sad. I'm genuinely sorry that you're sad. I don't know why you're this sad, and I hope that you can work through that. What can I do to help you get over this? What can I help you do to grieve? I'm sorry that you're sad. What else is going on here? It seems to trigger something else because it seems like you're really crying hard over the food. Is food the only thing going on? And usually the person will say, well, no, I just feel like I felt all the time. Well, let's talk about that. Why do you feel like you felt all the time? I just do. I'm not a good mom. I'm not this. I didn't change enough diapers. I'm not there with my kids all the time. And I got to work. Don't make da. Hold on now. Wait a second. You do a lot of these things well, so let's keep talking about these feelings. I'm being supportive. I'm just not discounting it, rescuing it, telling her to be quiet, get over it. I'm not doing those. I'm inviting the feelings. I'm inviting them. Inviting them. Desires. What about my desires? Well, if my feelings are my responsibility, are my desires? All right, of course they are. As adults, it's our duty to admit, own, and communicate our desires, knowing full well that our spouse does not exist to fulfill our desires. Your spouse is not a concierge. Your spouse is not the maid. Your spouse is not the chef. They are an end of themselves. They are not a means to an end. And this is the thing most people argue about in marriage, and that is conflicting desires. Just conflicting desires. I don't want to go to that restaurant. I do. You always get what you want. I don't. You're ugly. Well, you're stupid. I mean, just, my Lord. Kids in the back crying. I mean, just... Have you ever been around couples before when you hear them argue like that, and it's so ridiculous? Like, oh, you're looking at each other, what in the world just happened? And it doesn't occur to them. They're just, yeah. You're always like that. Shut up. You just, hey, Bob, I don't care. You drop us off. I mean, look, that's what marriage is. Marriage is when two independent whole people will have different desires. And marriage is about negotiating desires in ways that are best for the couple. You just want to negotiate ways that are best for the couple. You just want to negotiate. And it's always daily a negotiation. It can be something as silly as, in my household, I don't mind at all loading the dishwasher. Probably because I can do it quicker than I can unloading it. I guess that's it. I like things that are efficient and quick. So I don't mind that. Well, Elaine doesn't mind at all unloading them. So guess what? She unloads them and I load them. Well, that's negotiation. My desire is that I don't want to do it. Now, can I and do I unload them? Sure I do. It just means that's not my chief desire. Folding the clothes. I don't mind folding the clothes. I don't really like folding small things like socks and underwear and whatever because it takes a long time and I can't find the sock. But sheets, towel, big stuff, jeans, I do those in a heartbeat. Well, she's like, I don't mind that. She doesn't mind. I don't mind putting stuff in the laundry and switching over and over. But she doesn't mind folding this stuff. Well, I don't mind so much loading and transfer. So we just have desires and we negotiate it. What happens when they're the same? Well, then we pretend like we're adults. I mean, what if they're different about the same thing? What if we say, I don't want Chick-fil-A. Well, I want to go to Chipotle. Well, then we talk about it. We don't go, get over it, or submit, Ephesians 5, or whatever. We don't. We don't do that anymore. I have found that doesn't work, Rich. I just found it. In my family, it was real funny. There's a guy I work with, and he's a big old guy, just a big old guy. And I barely knew him. He had just started work, and we did too. And he's all tough guy talking and whatever. And I heard him the first day talking on the cell phone with his wife, who's a little bitty girl and woman. And they're both a sweet, sweet couple. And he was sitting down there in the chair, and he was chatting. And he said, well, no, honey, I think maybe, and he's all sweet and gentle, because outside he's joking, but he talks tough. No, honey, I said, you better say Ephesians 5. And he goes, no. His face, the panic. I said, I'm just kidding, man. No. And he hung up and goes, man, not my family, man, not my family. I'm like, dude, you are 500 times bigger than your wife, and you're scared to death of her. Dude, it's crazy. Especially knowing her, because she's so sweet. But yeah, it'd be his face. No, don't even kid. And I am kidding, by the way. So anyway, that stuff doesn't work. Submit, all this stuff. No, we negotiate. Which one do you really want, honey? I guess so-and-so. Oh, don't worry. We did what I did last time. You just negotiate. And if you find yourself in a marriage in any kind of situation where you find that you just don't want to give in whatsoever, just be honest. Just own it. Just be a grown-up. Be a mature person and say, do I really choose all the time? Do I really hog the remote like you say? Do I really always choose the show we watch? Just be the mature one and say, really? And be open to the fact that you might be wrong. And go, I'm going to change that. Thank you for the mirror. Thank you for the great service. Thank you. As Christ loved the church, who gave himself up, I appreciate your sacrificial love to put up with that years and years of me hogging the remote. Not anymore. We're going to make a chart on the refrigerator of who gets to come. No. All right, there's all kinds of ways to deal with desires. But they just negotiate it. Now, like with feelings, unhealthy people can suppress, discount, and punish a spouse's desires. I might really, Jeff comes home, and Shauna's like, this trash has been building up, just pouring all over the stuff. I'm just making up a story. I don't know if I touched too close to home.
Why is she sitting over
there? Yeah, look at this couple already sitting apart. The farther apart you sit in a class meeting, there's how healthy you are is the sign. Let's just say when it's piling over, and I'm not touching that nasty stuff. She's thinking, I'm trying to curl my nose like Shauna. And then Jeff's going to do it. And Jeff walks in. He's tired. He's had a long day. He's been a rough day, whatever. He's like, dude, my dogs are barking, as he says, and my feet are tired. I'm getting my shoes off. And he can't wait to plop down. Just a rest about 10 minutes. And Shauna's getting her anxiety. The trash is just overflowing. And he's going, man, that's the last thing I want to hear right now. She's over there working. Trash sure stinks. I heard you. Why aren't you doing something? You see, and it starts escalating. A mature, healthy person realizes I have a desire, in this case, Shauna, I have a desire for the trash to be out. That's my desire. It's not Jeff's desire. It's not my job to put that desire in Jeff. It's not my desire to guilt Jeff to do it to get what I want, because I can't deal with the anxiety of my desire. Healthy people deal with their own emotions and go, I feel anxious when I see that trash on the ground. It's causing me anxiety. I'm not going to ask anybody else to fix my anxiety. What I will do, since I'm so busy at this moment and I can't change it or don't want to change it, whatever, I'll ask Jeff, knowing full well he's not my concierge. He's not my maid. He's not my chef. And so when he walks in the door, if he says no, I might be sad that he says no, but I'm going to deal with my own sadness. And if I don't want to empty that trash, it's going to stay there for the next 4 days. And that's fine with me because I made my mind up. I'm not going to change it. Or I need to get over it and change the trash. But the desire is mine. And I'm not going to be mad at Jeff because he doesn't have the same desire. That's how it works in healthy marriages. Well, no one left, so all right. Well, they're still here. Yeah, no one. Shauna said, Now, that's ideal, healthy marriage. It is. Now, in my own marriage, I don't do that perfectly. I don't do that flawlessly. There are plenty of times where I have a desire, and I just assume, just by default, I assume surely Elaine wants the same desire I want, which makes me happy. Surely she does, and she does the same thing, and back and forth. And when we do, guess what you do? You own it. You confess it. You ask for forgiveness. You know what? I was wrong for that. I snapped at you, and I shouldn't have snapped at you. The reason why I snapped was because I didn't deal with my own desire. I was a little baby, and I had a temper tantrum, and I yelled at you for it, and that's ridiculous, and you don't deserve that at all, and that's not what you signed up in a marriage contract, nor with God or me. So I ask for your forgiveness, and as best I can, it will happen again. You just own it. Be a grown-up and say, I'm not going to do that again. It's nonsense. I want to grow up. I want to grow up and own my feelings, own my own desires. Now, speaking of desires, what about communication? Well, healthy spouses communicate their needs. That's both feelings and desires together. Now, the two most common unhealthy ways couples talk to each other, and all my experience, are these top two. The two common unhealthy patterns. Critical parent to child. Critical parent to child. And there's a whole lot here that we don't have time to cover in something called transactional analysis, but that's when one spouse acts like the critical parent, criticizes, judges, or seeks to control the other spouse. In return, the child, the other spouse, acts like a child and rebels against the critical parent by either throwing tantrums or being passive-aggressive. This is the absolute norm, the normal paradigm of the American marriage. And it goes like this. The man comes in, plops on the sofa, gets the TV, gets the remote, gets the beer, gets the football, whatever it is. The woman's scurrying in the background, doing all the work, cleaning up, cooking the food. I'm thirsty, or whatever it is. And in the meantime, she's got needs and desires, and she's getting built up frustration all day long. He didn't check on her. He didn't ask how her day went. She also had a busy day with the kids or not kids or whatever, or at work. And he didn't ask. He didn't seem to care at all because he's so wrapped up in work, he can't wait just to check out. And on and on. So they have all these desires and feelings they haven't processed through the day. And since they haven't processed it themselves, and because they're unhealthy and think it's the other person's job to help process the emotions, they wait till that happens. What's the perfect storm? And so the more she gives them, guess what she does? She keeps saying, I need this. And guess what the guy calls that? Nagging. Guess what he does to respond to the nagging? One of two things. Either, again, he's so upset with it, instead of processing his own feeling of, she's nagging me, that makes me upset and angry. Instead of telling her that, guess what I'll do in response? I'm acting like a baby. I'm going to throw a tantrum. I'm either going to turn the volume way up, or I'm going to scream and cuss, or I'm going to throw the remote, or I'm going to start calling her names, or say she's just like her mom. I'm going to do whatever it takes to push that button, or that ace of spades. If y'all know card games, that beats everything. I'll do whatever it takes to get her to get off my back. Or I'll be passive-aggressive. I'll do it in a second, honey. 30 minutes later. Just a second. I told you. Right? And then the next day, and guess what happened? Never happened. So guess what she's doing at midnight? Taking the trash out. All the while because, and he's thinking, he feels very vindicated because he barked her. I told you. He feels very vindicated for his behavior. Why? Because it's his way, internally, of telling her, you shouldn't have treated me that way. But since he did not process his own emotions, because he did not communicate clearly with her, he came across as a little child who threw a temper tantrum. I expressed it in different ways, but it's a temper tantrum. That's what little children do. My children, my 2-year children, that when they were real young, and sometimes still now, but when they have temper tantrums, they don't know how to control their emotions. They don't know how to sort them through, so they let loose. Well, that's appropriate for a child. They don't know how, in psychology, we call it containing. They don't know how to contain their emotions. They don't know what to do with them. That's appropriate. You're just kind of letting loose. But when you get older, we're supposed to grow up and be able to contain our emotions and deal with them, process, communicate it. The other one is being passive-aggressive. And that's like the first one. It can involve the first one, but doesn't have to. And that's instead of communicating your own feelings, you seek to punish your spouse by turning them out, doing the opposite of checking out, whatever. Tuning them out. So passive-aggressive, you tune them out, you do the opposite, or you just check out. I'm thinking of so many couples. I'm thinking of one right now immediately. They're not here in this room. In fact, now they're divorced. And back when they were first having their problems, and the guy finally opened up to me, I went straight to this one. I said, brother, let me tell you, here's what's going on in y'all's marriage. Because he finally asked me, or was it more open? And I say there's a love and brother. And we had a relationship by then, so there was some trust built up and so forth. I said, dude, she's your parent, you're the child, and you're nonstop passive-aggressive. Every single time she's not there, you give the kid sugar because you know she says don't give him that. And he had this stunned look on his face. Every time she says don't do it. And he goes, well, it's just silly. Have you told her that? Have y'all talked about what to feed the kids? She knows what I want. I mean, you see that kind of stuff? It becomes passive-aggressive. And so for years, she got more and more frustrated. He got more and more frustrated. And all the while, both of them were to blame. And that's not the reason. I'm not exactly sure what. There's a whole lot of reasons why they got divorced. And it's very unfortunate because every problem in their marriage could have been fixed. Every one of them. And theirs. Every one. I remember having a 2 or 3 hour conversation in our kitchen with her. And I finally, after this, I knew they were almost there. And I finally laid on the line, what's the deal? What's going on? Has he been incessant affairs? What's going on? And everything she mentioned came down to communication or boundaries. Everything. And I was going, this is great news. This is redeemable. Well, there's other stuff. What? Is he beating you? No. And now it came down to these issues over and over again. These things are so fixable. And all it takes with our owning it, it's owning it. And this leads to what I make a distinction, Clown Townsend don't. I make a distinction between arguing and fighting. Arguing is when two people have a heated discussion about an issue. They're arguing. They have a heated discussion about an issue. But the goal is, of course, they want to come to a decision that both will accept. It's kind of like a heated negotiation. That's good because you're on topic. You're on topic. Fighting is when you've left the topic. You don't care about the marriage getting along. You care about you winning. In fighting, that's when you find most people lost control. You find yourself yelling, screaming, calling names, whatever. And that's when you pull all the punches. You don't care what you say, as long as your spouse will be quiet and back down, and you win. And you go off huffing and puffing, but boy, you feel self-righteous. Boy, that feels good to win the argument. You just want to fight. And the problem, of course, is that means your spouse is a loser. You just made your spouse lose. And now it's a win-lose situation in marriage, and that's not a marriage, right? In a fighting situation, we treat our spouse like they're an enemy. And instead of loving our enemy, we end up punishing our enemy. And this is one of the severe cases, and that's what happens a lot. And I've counseled people all the time, and I make this distinction. I go, now, do you argue and do you fight? And it's a good day when the couples will come to me after many times, go back and say, I'll say, did you fight any? And they'll say, no. We had some arguments, but we didn't fight. I never lost control. Before I got to that point, I breathed. Before I got to that point, I left the room. Before I got to that point, or I stopped drinking so much, or I stopped doing this, and whatever. That's a good day. It's a good day when you're in a couple and you can have a heated disagreement, but stay on topic, and you're still caring about the other person. That's good. So if you ever meet that person who says, we don't ever argue, something's wrong. I knew a couple, they first got married. I remember she told Elaine, she said, we just love each other so much. We never argue. And it was sweet, and she meant it, and it was so sad. It's so sad because if you don't argue, it means someone's lying or someone's codependent, which means they're enmeshed. That means they don't have boundaries at all. It's that whatever you like. What's bad about that is because God didn't design you to do that. It's supposed to be two whole persons. Two individual persons will have disagreements. I don't want to discipline the kids that way. I don't want to spend money on that vehicle. I don't want to go on that vacation. I don't want to go to Taco Bell. There's a whole bunch of levels of disagreement, and they're going to happen. They will happen. So argument's going to happen. That's good. Embrace it. Like failure. Failure's our friend. Failure's our friend. So is arguing when it's done with the proper parameters. If we keep thinking, what's best for the marriage? What's best for my spouse? I don't want her or him to lose. How can I make sure they feel validated? How can I make sure I'm still listening, but I want to make sure my opinion is heard and their opinion is heard and we're going to be on the same page. And if we don't agree right now, and this is a big issue like money or vacation or a car, then let's sleep on it. And you know how we're going to do it? Because we're both in this together and we both want each other to win. So we're in no hurry. We're in no hurry. This is the one thing, praise God, me and Lane do well. And it took a lot of time to get there, but we do well. If there's a big purchase like buying a truck, buying a computer, whatever it is, we sleep on it. And I wait. If Lane doesn't feel peaceful, if I don't feel peaceful, we go, all right, we'll wait. If you don't feel peace, it's not, I'll wait. And then in the meantime, I'm gonna get the money aside, I'm gonna sell this and buy this and do it behind her back and secret. No, open book. No, because we're in this together. And this is our money and it's our life and it's our commitment to each other. And it's not worth a fight. Nothing. My desires never trump the desires of the relationship. Well, what do we do now? Well, what we do is admit there's a problem. How do I establish a boundary in my marriage? Admit there's a problem. Admit that there's unfair spending. Does she get to spend it all on shoes and whatever, or he spends it all on golf clubs and boating, but you get jack? Is it unfair? Is it inequitable? Disciplining the children. What about when it comes to sex? Admit there's a problem. Does someone withhold love or affection or attention from you? Whatever it is, you can't wish away the problems. You just can't. One day it'll get better. If anything works the whole night, just picture me doing this here, just limping. Just give it time. Just give it time. Just think how goofy David looked limping. Or just give it time. I'm going to wish it away. Right? I'll just keep praying. What are you praying for exactly? Are you praying that an angel is sent by God the Father to communicate your desires to him or her in a dream? I woke up. God told me you were mad at me. This is a miracle. Why didn't you tell me anyway? You're just like your mom. It's not going to help. It's not going to help. It's going to cause an argument. Why in the world didn't you tell me? Don't you love me enough to tell me the truth? For crying out loud, admit there's a problem. I mean, admit it to yourself first, and then admit it to your spouse. And what's the specific boundary or problem exactly? What boundary of yours is being violated? Remember, boundaries are not ways to control others. It's not a way to control others. It's the opposite. You're not interested in telling or making the other person change. A boundary is not when I say, Elaine, don't do this anymore. No, that means I'm being her parent. I didn't marry my parent. I married another individual whole person who's an adult, and I'm an adult. I'm not her stinking parent, so I don't tell her what to do. A boundary is when I claim responsibility for what's mine to claim, and I don't go, you shouldn't be so bossy. What I say is, well, I'll tell you what I'll say in a second. I'll tell you. But you just identify the specific boundary problem. What is it in my life that I value, that is my responsibility, that he or she keeps violating? For example, every time I come home and he's sad about a bad day, he gets mad at me if I don't stop everything I'm doing and dote on him for 20 minutes. And I'm not his counselor. I'm his spouse. Yet he gets very angry with me if I don't stop what I'm doing. That's what it is. And it makes me mad. It makes me angry. And what I've been doing is, in my anger, is I withhold love from him. I don't touch him as much. I don't make him food anymore. And so I've been punishing him, and that's immature. I need to own that. And that's step number 3. I need to take full responsibility for what's mine. Just take full responsibility. It's my responsibility. I have been getting angry with you. Instead of communicating my anger with you, I bark. I hold it in, and I hold it in, and I hold it in, and I said, stop it! And until this time, that's been very childish of me. Instead of communicating the very first time it happened, honey, that kind of makes me uncomfortable. Did you mean to talk to me like I'm your child? Did you mean to talk to me like you're my parent? I might have misheard it. Please don't talk to me like please don't talk to me like that if that's what you meant, because it makes me feel as if, or I respond to that by feeling like I'm a child. I'm not a child, but maybe I've done something to push your button. But whatever's my responsibility, I'll take it. Whatever it is. And sometimes you don't have anything that's responsible for that cause that maybe the other spouse is just wrong. That's possible. Discover the origin of the conflict if possible. By that I mean, why have you been letting this happen for so long? Why is it okay with you? I had a good friend who had just a horribly boundary-violating mom who's clearly has some bad disorders. And it took him years to heal through that, and he's able to say, no, mom, and whatever, no, you can't talk to me this way in front of my kids. No, you can't. I mean, he's good about that. But with his own marriage, he has a very hard time. Very hard time. And I remember one time asking him, after we talked a lot about, or listened a whole lot, one time I said, why is it okay? Why is it you don't tolerate that with your mom, but you fully embrace it with your wife? Why the difference? What's going on here? Because what happens is you've been blaming your wife all this time, but it's not your wife's problem that you're putting up with it. That you're putting up with it. Not the original instance of it, but putting up with it. So what am I doing? Why am I doing this for so long? Usually the first question in counseling I'm going to ask is, tell me about your parents. Tell me about your parents. And every time, how's your relationship with your mom or dad? Usually someone starts crying, and there's an epiphanal moment. My dad did that to my mom all my life. And it just dawned on me. He always made her do this and got mad and cussed her out. Why didn't I see that? Especially in parenting. We instantly do what we do with our children, what our parents do with us, until we sort through that. But think about those things. You might have to have a good counselor, a good trusted friend to help you, or just a good spouse who knows what they're doing. Have a trusted same-gendered person or support group which you gain support and encouragement. So if there's a bad, say your husband or wife, say they get real angry with you on a certain issue, and you're scared, well, get some kind of same-gendered friend who will support you and say, don't you give up. Make sure there's some support. And you practice baby boundaries, just baby step, especially with safe people. Practice saying the word no. No, thank you. I don't want that food. Thank you, though. Practice that. Just practice it. And then, of course, when you've got all the support, you're identified, you claim responsibility, you go to your spouse and say, I'm not going to let this happen anymore. I won't. I'm not going to do that. Now, I'm encouraging you, number 7 on my outline here. Look on that, page 11 at the top, please. I'm really encouraging you. This is a wonderful, wonderful tip for when it comes to dealing with these boundary problems in marriage. Number 7, first, reinforce that you're committed to the relationship. I encourage you, whatever it's worth, start out with that. Honey, I love you. I love that we're married. We're in this in the long haul. I'm not going anywhere. Clear? Got it? High five, kiss, whatever. Now, state clearly what the change will be. You see what you're doing? You're starting out at the gate by saying, I love us, I love you, but here's the change. And then you communicate clearly that you will no longer tolerate this boundary violation. It's not about making the other person change. It's about stating how you will be changing. For example, before boundaries, you just got to stop drinking. You just got to stop drinking. I've told you over and over again, it's ruining our family. What kind of man are you? You're wrecking our lives. Cussing them out, throwing things across the room. I've heard and seen these things. After boundaries, you may choose not to deal with your drinking if you want. That's your choice. However, I will not continue to expose myself and the children to this chaos. In fact, the next time you're drunk, we'll go to a friend's for the night, or my mom or dad's, whatever, and we're going to tell them why we're there. And I am extremely angry and sad that you refuse to make healthy changes that affect us all. It makes me very angry that you choose to be so stuck in your condition. You choose not to get help. It makes me very angry. And I'll deal with my anger because it's my responsibility with my anger. But I'm letting you know I'm very mad. Now, your drinking is your choice, but what I put up with is mine. So you can get all drunk you want, but you'll be drunk alone. Me and the kids we're going. The second it happens, I'm gone for the night, and the next night, and the next night until it stops. I'm just letting you know. I'm not dragging you into recovery. I'm not dragging you in. I'm not guilting you into it. I'm not going to bring in 30 people and I'll make fun of you and say you've lost. No, I'm just letting you know, here's what's happening because my boundaries have been violated too long, and I want to stand up for myself. What about before boundaries with pornography? You're a pervert. It's so degrading. What kind of sick person are you? After boundaries. I'm not choosing to share you sexually with naked women in magazines or online. It's up to you. It's up to you. I will only sleep with someone who's interested in me. Make up your mind and choose. Choose to get help or choose not to. But I'm letting you know, if you choose not to get help, if you choose not to get recovery, then that's going to be bad for you and me. You are making decisions that's hurting our relationship because I won't be shared with you in this way. I understand there's a whole host of things and slip-ups, and I get it. But that's not what, and whatever it is, you put in whatever your boundary problem is. You're so wasteful with your money. You don't respect me and the hard work I do and da-da. No. Honey, here's the deal. The next time you spend that money, it's a secret, I find out all the money's been gone, the very next time I'm going to the account, I'm creating my own account, I'm closing the other account, and you'll no longer have any access to any money I make at my job. You'll be on your own. And I will pay for the house and the so-and-so and the food, and that's it. And you can't touch it until I see that you're responsible for your money. I can't happen. I love you too much to let you hurt yourself and us with this. I'm not going down to the burning ship. I won't do it. You can choose to change or not. I hope you do. I'm very sad that you're making this decision. I'm very angry sometimes. I get very frustrated. But I'm taking ownership because for too long, instead of talking to you about it, I just raged at you, or I've got passive-aggressive, or I resented you. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to resent you anymore because resentment means I didn't communicate my own, I didn't process my own emotions. I'm going to process my own emotions. I'm letting you know that we won't share an account anymore if this keeps happening. Now, I'm here for you, and I'll help. We'll make it happen. We'll find a support group for financial stuff or sex addiction or drinking, alcohol, tobacco, drugs, whatever it is. I'm here for you. I will drive you there myself if you need someone to drive you. I will do it. I'm here in the long run. But until you make a commitment to healing, here's the boundaries of my life from now on. And then, of course, number 8, the thing you got to do no matter what, when the person is working on it, and that's make a decision to forgive. Now, forgiveness, and I'll wrap up on this, forgiveness means to cancel a debt. It's no longer wishing for someone to be punished. So you're canceling a debt. Now, depending on the offense, it will take some time to heal the emotional wounds caused by the person. Yes. Now, however, deciding to forgive means to choose to take the steps that will help you forgive. And see, remember, forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing, and that's a whole other hour. It's been 2-3 more hours on that one. These are not the same thing. I can choose to work on forgiving Lou for hitting me all these years, but that doesn't mean I have to be exposed to her physical presence anymore at all. And I can work on forgiving her and work on reconciling that relationship, and I can still be wounded for years to come because of what she caused in the past. And sometimes I regress, and sometimes when I see that old ballpark or I smell that popcorn or whatever it is, my heart starts racing and I start grieving again. And it's not because I'm grieving as something happened right now, presently. It's because I still have a wound. That might take time to heal. That's okay. Doesn't mean I haven't forgiven because I still hurt. It means I'm a human, and I still hurt sometimes. But making a decision to forgive means I'm just going to get on that path. I'm not going to decide at the beginning, forget you, I don't care what you ever say, I'm never going to do it. No. As Christians, we know that's a fundamental principle of virtue for God, the Father, Son, and Spirit, is forgiveness. So we decide, I'm going to work on forgiving you. And I'm going to do I own that. I'm going to go see counseling. I'm going to pray. I'm going to journal. I'm going to devour my Bible. I'm going to work on forgiving you. I'm going to work on forgiving. Now, divorce is not a boundary in marriage. It is the end of marriage. You don't hear this material I've covered tonight and say, whoo, that's good. David, good news. Last Wednesday, we got a divorce on Thursday morning. High five. Good boundaries for me. No, that's not a boundary in marriage. That's the end of it. That's not the next logical step. Right? There's a whole lot of other steps before anything should be considered whatsoever. But that's not a boundary in marriage. That's it. Okay, next week we're going to talk about boundaries with children. And come ready, because he's ready for you. He means business. On that note, do I have one question or a comment or any question I can handle as a group? If not, of course, I'll be here afterward. Any burning thing? Did Lou really hit me? She didn't hit me. Multiple times she hit me. Multiple. I said that once. I gave an analogy about hitting. One time at a church, there's this older woman. Never met her in my life. She looked some real nice older woman. And when I said that, she went, this face of panic, like she would actually be accused of that. And I said, you haven't hit me. She hasn't hit me, people. It's like, bless her heart. I knew you wouldn't do that. Lou has not hit me, for the record. Yes, sir. That's a great question. Ephesians 5, I'm repeating it for the microphone. Ephesians 5, what do you do with the fact that he says to love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself as an offering and so forth? It seems like you kind of that violates some boundaries in that you may not really want to do it, but you need to do it. That's a great question. My response to that, and quickly, I might be able to unpack a little more if you want to chat afterwards, is there's so much there. One is, in the ancient context, Paul is writing these household codes in a way that's similar to other people, but making radical changes. And this is one of those radical changes that he's trying to demonstrate to those early Christians. That is, unlike other Greek and Roman men who have absolute power, paterfamilias, over a family, men are supposed to see themselves like Jesus, who emptied himself like Philippians 2, who became the servant. So instead of seeing yourself as the reigning lord over any second I want, I can abort a child, I can divorce, I can get a concubine. Paul is trying to change that paradigm on its head and say, no, like Jesus, you're not the Lord of the realm. So I would say number one is, overall, that's a general New Testament consensus of one of the things. Now, big man here in Ephesians, there you go. His dissertation and work was on Ephesians. Would you concur basically with partly what I've just said?
Yeah, the comparison between the Roman world and what the Christian world
Yeah, that's so good. Comparison, yeah. So there are some similarities, but big distinction, and I would argue that's one of the big distinctions. But secondly, when it comes to boundaries, of course, Paul doesn't specifically talk about boundaries in that particular area. I'm still convinced if Paul were here and I could interview him, he would still say, yes, you have boundaries because you're loving her and sacrificing for her because you want to. You're not sacrificing for her because you feel so guilty and shameful and I just got to do it. It's you say, my God-given privilege and role is sacrifice. Now, lest we forget, in 5:21, it's husbands and wives submit to one another. In fact, in verse 22, there is no verb there. You have to supply it from the verse above it. So mutual submission is assumed the whole bit. And that kind of submission or service, as modeled by Jesus, doesn't mean they give up their own desires and so forth. It just means it's my moral duty as a person who loves my neighbor as myself and loves God, that I serve her. It's a moral duty. But I do it freely. I don't do it because I'm guilty because of Ephesians 5, or I give because I see it as a great privilege to serve you like Jesus served us and is serving us. I think that's what I would say off the cuff, but if you want to chat later. Yes, ma'am. She said that Christ serves us beyond our own desires and beyond what we dictate. With that, I would say I agree when our own desires are not His, but I disagree when our desires are His. Then, of course, He supports that. Of course He does. So, in other words, but it's not true that Christ only supports us only in His own desires. There are plenty of times we might feel, I want to go serve the poor because Jesus served the poor, and He's going to fill that up. But those desires, of course, are back to moral desires. And when it comes to Christian marriage, when it comes to desires and needs, I'm not talking about moral things. For example, if my wife really, really, really desired to go do drugs, I don't support her desire. I don't go, that's your own desire, work on that. Of course not. She says, I really desire to be with other men. Well, you just take control of that and deal with it and go. So moral issues are never on the table. Then I would say is, we need to pray about that desire, because that desire you're having is going to go down a direction that no horse, or is one that's not leading to a Christian direction. In that regard, I do not support that desire, and that's the whole point at the very end. Your desire to drink away your problems is an unchristian, unhealthy desire I don't support. Now, it's your responsibility and my responsibility to deal with our desires. That might mean to get rid of them or to deal with them and process my compulsive behaviors or my desire for this or that, and find out what real need am I trying to get met. And the real need you're trying to get almost always is a genuine God-given desire that we're trying to get met by some other thing. So I desire that alcohol bottle, not really, rather I desire not to feel the pain because as when I was a kid I was beat by my dad, and I never got over it. Well, what I really desire really is to deal with my grief and the woundedness of my father and be a healthy individual. But I can't deal with the pain because it's overwhelming, so I drink it off. So I desire drinking. What I really desire is to be healed and whole and have, as much as possible, a loving relationship with my dad that I don't have. Well, that's Christian. But nevertheless, it's my responsibility to deal with all those desires I have and work through them and process through them and then pray and beg the Spirit, of course, to help us walk in newness of life and give us His desires. And that's a very common thing. Yeah.
Oh,
I'll say it's a very common thing when it comes to purchasing things. Is this really what I should be spending my money on? Well, we pray for that. God, give me the desires. Tell me what to desire. If me and my wife are arguing over something, or if there's an issue about money or whatever, disciplining the children, that's one of the first things we do. That's one of the first things we do is pray. Well, maybe one of us has a desire that's not a Christian desire, as it were. Well, let's pray about that. And if it is, let's get rid of it. Let's get rid of it.
Yeah, I was just going to add,
Please.
David isn't saying that the husbands shouldn't sacrifice for their wives or that we shouldn't love people unconditionally. No, we're to do all of those things. What he is saying is that we shouldn't think that love is codependency. We shouldn't go out of our way and help and, quote unquote, love people to the point where we're not helping them any longer, where we're doing things that actually enables their dysfunction. Mm-hmm. A man is to love his wife totally unconditionally and give his himself to his wife like Christ did the church, but not in a way where he becomes a doormat, where he encourages her misbehavior or encourages a dysfunction in the relationship.
Amen.
Well, that's not what love is.
Not at all. And that's where the rest of the New Testament comes to bear. I mean, Paul wouldn't tell the church at Corinth, you kick that man out of here, unless you're married, because then you got to Christ serve the church, because then no matter what your wife's doing, if she's sleeping around everybody, you got to keep on serving her. That's what Jesus, no, he wouldn't. No, he wouldn't. Jesus is not a doormat himself. And so the rest of the moral teaching of the New Testament is bear on your spouse as well. Yeah, but thank you. Let me say a prayer for us and close this up. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for the opportunity to meet again, and I thank you for the reminder that you will hold us responsible for it. Help us, those of us who are married or even want to be married, help us in our marriages be the healthiest individual person we can be. Help us own our own feelings and responsibilities and desires and deal with them, and of course lean upon our spouse in appropriate ways. Help us, in the same token, be a soft place to fall for our spouse. Help us be a gentle place. Help us be a forgiving mate that doesn't hold on forever to things. Help us extend grace much more than we do judgment. But of course, at the same time, knowing what we value. So please help us implement these things and love them freely, not based on guilt or any other issue, but because you loved us, and it's a great privilege to love our neighbor as ourselves. When we do fail, please, Spirit, pick us back up. Evil likes to trump on us when we're down and make us feel like such awful spouses, and certainly when it comes to parenting, such awful, awful parents. Please help us, of course, forgive ourselves. We know that through you we were forgiven on the cross. Help us embrace that. Help us embrace it and walk in newness of life. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.